morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. Our focus at Emory Executive Education is really around equipping today's and tomorrow's leaders with the perspectives and the skills and the tools that they need to be successful and that they need to run your organization successfully. To this end, we've been building a portfolio of learning opportunities focused on AI, leveraging analytics, digital transformation, both in person and online. So it's such an important area that, in fact, many of these, like our upcoming Leveraging AI for Business course, gets updated every time we run it. In fact, if you're interested, the next one does start on April 30th. It's also the reason for this morning's Business Over Breakfast fireside chat on all things AI with Joe Sutherland, the director of the Center for AI Learning at Emory University. We're going to delve into some fascinating and the ever-changing world of artificial intelligence. And during the fireside chat, Joe's going to share some insights, answers hopefully lots of your questions on a broad spectrum of AI topics, from the latest advancements and applications to future workforce trends. Joe is the founding director of the Center for AI Learning at Emory University, where he also teaches. He serves as a lead principal investigator for the Emory branch of the US AI Safety Institute Consortium. I have no idea what that is, Joe, so maybe that's a question you help answer. And he's associate faculty of the Empathetic AI for Health Institute at Emory Healthcare. Joe's worked with private investors to build profitable companies that were acquired, like the artificial intelligence startup Peachtree AI, the fintech startup Prattle. He's also served in executive roles at Cisco and Amazon. And from 2011 to 13, he served in the White House Office of Scheduling and Advance for President Barack Obama. Joe's an author, has been widely published in academic, business, and popular presses. His book, Analytics the Right Way, A Business Leader's Guide to Putting Data to Productive Use, helps CEOs to build organizational capability and enhance data-driven execution while they focus on managing new strategies in this era of AI. We're going to spend the entire hour asking Joe questions. So maybe we'll try and stump Joe for a while there. So I'm going to start off asking a few, and then please put your questions in the Q&A box, and I will try and get Joe to answer as many of those as possible in the time we have. So let's start off, Joe.
Thank you for that awesome introduction. Oh, and by the way, thanks everybody for being here. I actually just had a baby. He's only 3 months old. This is one of the first times I've quote unquote gotten out of the house, even though it's on Zoom. So I just want to say thank you for that opportunity.
Well, and congratulations. I hope he's sleeping well and feeding well.
Yeah, but he wakes up every morning. I call it Carter. His name is Carter. Carter's Coffee House. So sometimes the doors open at 3 o'clock. Sometimes they open at 5. We don't know. But he doesn't want to get up. He wants to have a drink and he wants to chat. So.
Well, enjoy it. They all of a sudden they turn into like hairy 20-year-olds, right?
Yeah, before I know it, he's going to be.
Before you know it.
Yeah.
So let's start with what is Emory's AI.Humanity initiative, and why is that important? And then how does the Center for AI Learning fit into that?
So AI Humanity started a few years ago under the leadership of Greg Fenves and Ravi Bellamkonda, who's now the provost at The Ohio State University, I want to say. And it represented a significant investment in excess of about, at the time, it was 100 million. It's growing now to 250 to 300 million, depending on how you look at the investment. As part of a portfolio to help bring Emory's methodological capabilities into the new era. One of the stories when we were talking to the board of like, why do we need to invest this much was, well, there was this lab back in the 90s. Like I guess they had created this new microcellular assay technique, which is like a biological technique that
Mm-hmm.
new methodology accelerated biological research. And within 5 years, so some of the labs took this technique and they were like, we're going to use it, we're adopting it. It's, it's hard to adopt it, but once we make the investment, it'll help. The other labs were like, no, no, we're sticking with the old ways. And within 5 years, like none of the old labs were funded anymore. And so there was this sort of story, there's a lesson from that story, which is if Emory does not invest with the latest and greatest tools, then we cannot be working on the biggest and hardest issues. And the second part of it was, well, why would Emory invest in artificial intelligence? Why not like a Georgia Tech, or why don't you just take that money, give it to Georgia Tech? Is a question I get, which is funny because I'm like that would never happen. That doesn't make sense. Emory and Georgia Tech are separate institutions, but the question stands, which is like, why are you investing in AI? And the truth is, I think that Emory has the opportunity to develop artificial intelligence applications in the substantive areas that no other university can. Areas like healthcare, areas like the law, areas like business, with goizueta, and the arts and humanities, which are, I think, historically underrepresented in the computational sciences. And so that was part of the story. But we actually think that when it comes to domain-specific applications, we can beat anybody. It's not just about the methods. If you want to go build a more complex large language model, go to tech, and there's nothing wrong with it. It helps us, right? But if you want to work on the hardest issues that are most important to society, come to Emory and do that. And so that was the seed of that of initiative. Since then, we've now hired 50 tenure track faculty, which, to put it in perspective, is kind of like starting a new like college. It's enough faculty to, like, I think, be a college.
Oh yeah.
It we've now sent about 750 students through all of our programs, because we have AI majors, AI minors, AI experiential learning programs. We have secured lots of grant funding, which is another objective of the initiative, because we don't want to just be relying on like endowment and gifts. And all these things together, I think, have really started to pave a path towards where we can go in the future. This summer, we are running student experiential learning programs. That's kind of another twist, I think, here is we don't want to just teach them how to use AI like in a bubble. We want to teach them how to use it on real world problems. And so what we do for that program, we run about 120 students through it every year. And they have to work on real world problems. So if you have a problem at your company and you want some great educated students to go work on it, please get in touch, because they need projects to work on.
I think that's really a hallmark of what we do, which is not just the theory, but it's the theory in practice. So how do you use it? How do you advance, in terms of the Goizueta Business School, how do you advance business? How do you advance your organization? How do you advance your team through the application of whatever the technology is? Now, I know that there's a couple of questions already, but I do want to just do a level set so that everybody, I suspect that everybody's knowledge around AI is from I can spell AI to I use it every day, and I'm leveraging it for advancing my business. But maybe we can just level set on some terms, Joe. So we hear there's Copilot, there's ChatGPT, there's Gemini, there's Claude, there's Grok, there's DeepSeek. What are all of these? Are they the same? Are they different? How should we think about that body? And I'm sure there's probably another one that just came out this week.
There's always new large language models coming out. Large language models are a type of technology that takes text as an input and then generates text as an output. The way it works under the hood, and when we were creating these models, as a scientific profession, we called them the dumbest language models in the world, because all they really do, I mean, I'm gonna oversimplify it, but all they really do is they're kind of like super duper autocomplete. Like, you put in some text and it tries to predict what the next word is going to be, given all the documents it's read before, and given all the text that you just gave it. And then it just keeps doing that. It's like, oh, well, that word I made, now we're going to use that word as an input. We're going to make another word. Going to use those 2 words as an input, make another word. 3 words as an input, make another. And, for the most part, the differentiation between all these model providers has so far been the context window that you can provide to this. So, first it was you can provide 300 words. Now it's like you can provide 15,000 words or something like that. And interestingly, what we've seen now is that the performance of the models starts to get worse after a certain point, because it's over averaging all the sort of signals that it gets from the words that you provide to it. So that used to be the original differentiator. Some models could take longer context windows than others. Now we're seeing like cost as a differentiator. So like DeepSeek operates at about 98% the cost, 98% less the cost than ChatGPT does. So, for every word you get back from DeepSeek, for every 50 words you get back from DeepSeek, you would have only gotten 1 from ChatGPT. And that 50x multiplier is pretty big, especially when you think about the impact to how we generate energy, because if you need 98% less energy to generate the same output, that helps us understand how we need to plan for energy infrastructure here in this state and other states. It changes how we think about like the productivity and the unit economics of this stuff. Like one of the funny things is like a lot of these, if you guys know what Y Combinator is, it's a startup incubator. It's well known. It's out in Silicon Valley. And a lot of the startups there were solving tasks that usually you could just pay a human to do for about 20 cents. And they were solving it with a large language model that costs like $1.50. So it's like every time you want to solve a 20-cent problem, you were losing $1.30, right? And some of the unit economics have shifted as these costs have been differentiated. So and then there's tonal differences, et cetera. But these days they are being commodified. OpenAI actually just released what's called an open weights model. They announced that they're going to release an open weights model, so we'll see if it actually happens. And the open weights models are essentially make this a commodity where you can go and download the model, you can use it, you can tune whatever you want to tune. And I mean, there's different agreements that they put in place, so we'll see if it comes through. But I think largely they're becoming commodities, and the advantage is going to be in how you use them, not in just having one.
So there's another, and I'm going to get to the questions. I can see them coming in, but there is another, I think, layer we need to think about in terms of the landscape. So generative AI versus agentic AI versus artificial general intelligence. Are they the same? Are they different? How should we be thinking about those?
That's a good question. Generative AI is really, it's a misnomer. If you were to look, all these definitions have been so muddied because I think a lot of the big research labs and model providers, they all want to claim credit right now for, bringing the world into the 22nd century or whatever the kind of next, Jetsons stage is going to be. And so they've redefined a lot of this stuff over time. And just because a lot of people start singing the same tune, the definition changes. Back 10 years ago, we would think of artificial intelligence as a big umbrella. It included lots of different types of models, techniques, et cetera. But the thing that really differentiated AI from machine learning was the decision-making component. So you have machine learning, which is all about learning rules from the environment that help inputs turn into outputs without actually programming these programs, like how to turn the inputs into outputs. That was what machine learning was. You could just discover the rules. Sometimes the rules were wrong, but they worked, right? Artificial intelligence was, now that we have an output, a prediction about what we think is going to happen based on all these rules, and maybe we have lots of different predictions because we have lots of different ways we think the world might go if you change the inputs. What's the decision I'm going to make? And the decision-making function is always constrained by your context, your information, and exactly where you want to go and create value. So and that's the action that you take in the world. What's the actual action you're going to take? So we used to think of AI as the decision-making layer that kind of executes complex human responsibilities on top of machine learned predictions. Now, deep learning, which is kind of where all these generative AI models go, is really a subset of machine learning. It's a way of creating lots of different rules, like in great complexity and great levels of interaction that can generate very, very, I guess, or let me put it a different way. It can produce outputs that look a lot or seem a lot, or use inputs that look a lot or seem a lot, like things that only humans could previously process, like, computer vision, audio, et cetera. So those are really machine learning algorithms. I think generative AI was a misnomer because we kind of stuck it up at this decision-making layer. But in reality, it's really just a mechanism to try to, predict and produce things. Now, agentic AI is this new paradigm that's been introduced, which is in a lot of ways just like, IT automation of the past. We're going to take this business process and we're going to make inputs turn into outputs a lot more cheaply than what we normally. I saw somebody ask about RAG too. We'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah. Hold on, thought.
And the value proposition is going to be cheaper. So you might have hired a person at $1. Now it's going to cost you $0.01. So that all goes to your EBITDA, and great, right? So that's this agentic AI paradigm, where we're just replacing human tasks with like slightly more sophisticated versions of machine learning models that can make decisions, that we delegate authority to, without having a human in the loop per se. The problem is that I think people have started to redefine AGI, artificial general intelligence, such that they're going to be able to claim credit that agentic AI has achieved the future of AGI. And AGI used to mean like walking, talking robots that could look, feel, do everything that humans could do autonomously, like truly, C3PO level intelligence. And now it's been redefined to computers that can do tasks just as good as any human, and if not better than any expert within that task area, which is a highly productivity-focused definition, highly task-specific, and it's highly related to, and I should mention this, only the tasks that have been defined as performance metrics. So, of course, one of these agentic AI models, or systems, I should say, because there's lots of models underlying them, is going to be really great at doing the MCAT because it knows all the best MCAT answers. So it's going to regurgitate the best MCAT answers. And
the best LSATs and the best G.
And then it's like the headline comes out and it's like ChatGPT is better than doctors. And it's like, okay, we made a few leaps here. If I had a cheat sheet the whole time I was taking the MCAT, I could have just added an MD onto my PhD, maybe. I don't know. I'm oversimplifying it again, but like it's kind of the same point, which is like I'm not trained to be a physician, right? But like I could pass the MCAT if I had all the answers. And so I think that there's this tension that's arising where a lot of AI researchers are like, what are you talking about? Like, no, we're not getting to AGI. That's not happening. And then all the labs are like, no, we're definitely there because the definition has changed. And I think that confuses a lot of the public and it creates headlines that are misleading. So hopefully that gives a little bit of landscape.
Thank you. Now, does it make sense to answer Court's question about RAG at this point? Because there's lots of other questions about applications. So
let's talk about applications, because we can get to RAG and methods and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. So Donna asked a couple of questions. What are some of the latest advancements in AI that you're seeing being integrated into medical devices? And how do you see AI transforming the future of medical diagnostics and treatment?
So the most that I've seen goes back to this question about how do you predict a rare event? And then if you do see a rare event about to happen, what action should you take? So people who, there's a new device I just talked to a startup about that basically there's like I think it's the carotid artery in your neck. If you can stimulate that when you're having some sort of like vasoconstriction reflex, it reduces the likelihood that you're going to have like some sort of brain damage or like a stroke or something like that. And so this medical device is listening for, some sort of constriction of your blood system, your cardiovascular system. And when it senses a problem, it's going to automatically, it's going to make a decision to try to stimulate it to open it back up, right? So those types of medical devices, you could construe them as artificial intelligence because it's making a prediction about what's about to happen, and it's making a decision based on that prediction, and is doing it autonomously without a human in the loop, right? So that fulfills the criteria for AI, but it's not necessarily like, a Star Trek, technology, right? It's just like, let me go and we're going to scan your body and we're going to remove all the cancerous cells and we're going to, that's not exactly what's happening with medical devices. I think it's more like sort of point solutions right now. And that's good. I mean, I think that will be helpful for people who have that malady. I think that the bigger, sort of bucket of AI applications comes to business operations. For example, what we're doing at Emory right now is we have microphones in all the rooms when you go and get, a checkup. And instead of having a scribe there, or even, actually many times it's just the doctor themselves was in the, they're trying to pay attention to you, listen to what's going on. You're typing on your computer, get the note, listen again, you're distracted. You're trying to decide what, codes you need to select so that, the insurance company can get the right transcript for the billing. And, that can all be done now through our large language model technologies. That's just listening to what's happening and generating the visit note and then predicting which codes need to be applied. That's a great use case because all of a sudden physicians they can just pay attention to their patients.
That's a fabulous thing. I remember going to a doctor years ago. It was like, suddenly I've got a computer screen between me and the doctor. I was like, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, and here's the funnier thing is, it doesn't all have to be AI, right? Like for a while, passwords, cybersecurity has become much more important over the past, decade. And passwords, like your password change every 5 days, it seems like. And so you go in, you're a doctor, you're trying to log in, you can't log in, and you're logging in for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but in 10 minutes you could have seen the patient, you could have been out there. The new technologies, you use your badge, you tap it on an RFID device, and then you log in, right? I mean, that type of stuff, it's not AI, right? But it's technology enabling a much better care experience. I mean, it's amazing stuff. There's other stuff, fall detection is really big, especially in, nursing homes and other types of rehabilitation centers. Not everyone can be monitored all the time. And so we've been developing technologies that can watch for when people fall down, immediately alert a staff person so they can go and help pick you back up. That's going to be important because, a lot of the boomers are starting to retire. The boomers are starting to think, it's one of the largest generational shifts, and, who's going to be moving into nursing facilities, rehabilitation facilities, healthcare facilities. So we're starting to think how do we provide, this is maybe taking a step back, the best level of care at the greatest scale possible, because we're going to need it, especially as costs of healthcare only go up. So I see it. Medical devices is important. I think it's important. But I also see a big area right now, just as business, operations, automation, and scaling.
So Nika asks, what are the best practices for AI adoption from a change management perspective? So maybe take some of the experiences, the use cases that you've seen, and what do you think of as the best practices?
I think what I see most of the time is an executive team that becomes either enamored with the possibilities, but totally aimless on how to execute them, or an executive team that's been sold black magic in the past and is now gun shy to invest in anything, or a general sort of bureaucratic, inertia that prevents you from ever really being able to get off the ground with any of the investments that are required to go and use these technologies. All those things are bad because in the first case, you spend way too much money and you don't get enough back. In the second case, you spent too much money in the past and now you're too scared to invest. So you're about to get your lunch eaten. And in the third case, there's basically there's no investment possibility to be made. So you're getting your lunch eaten anyway. And what I see is, I think number one, executives have to be aligned literally at the highest levels to support initiatives like this. And that requires literacy, right? So, and go one step further. I think right now there was a recent, Data EQ it's a data platform provider. They released a survey that I thought was pretty astonishing, which is like 74% of CEOs are worried they're about to lose their jobs because they don't have an AI strategy that anybody understands or is any good. And, and I'm like, number one, you don't need an AI strategy. Okay. It's not, that's an incentive for you to go and just start blowing smoke up your board's, ears, right? Because, basically you're going to go and say, oh, we're using AI in this one toy use case that makes no difference for the bottom line. Just so they're like, okay, we're using AI. Good. Like all my, my grandkids, when they ask me at Thanksgiving, like, how are you using AI, Grandpa? I know that you run Halliburton, like it gives you an answer for that question. Right. And I think that the boards themselves, right? Let's say that you do bring point there is you don't need an AI strategy. You need a strategy that integrates artificial intelligence into the business context, helps you orient within the world. I mean, strategies.
Or a digital transformation strategy, right? I mean, so that you're seeing your world through a digital lens.
Digital transformation gets a bad rap these days, to be honest. Like digital transformation is seen as a consultant, so to speak, right? Where a consultancy comes in, we're going to digitally transform, but then you get, all this army of people you end up paying through the nose for, and then ultimately the 5-year strategy, it expires after 6 months. So like
right.
that's, and I think that post-COVID, like a lot of people learned that lesson, and so I think what's happening now is you need a 6-month strategy, right? It's like, and you need to be able to bring in all these trends because they're changing so fast. That's point number one. Point number two, the boards themselves, they're busy people, they're experienced in their industries, they're highly seasoned decision makers. Like one question I get is, do I need to put an AI expert on the board? No. No, like, a content expert is going to look at everything like a nail because they just got a big hammer. You need people who know which nails to hit, how hard you need to hit them, and when you need to hit them. Okay, that's an important thing. But at the same time, they're asking for these AI strategies and they don't know how to evaluate them. So I think it creates this misaligned management incentive where the CEO and the executive team are like, well, we got to show them something that makes them feel like, oh, wow. And they might just basically bring you something that makes no sense. And then actually, if you bring the very boring thing that actually works, they might be like, that wasn't what we wanted. That's not sexy enough. And so I think there's literacy that's needed at the board level. I think there's executive team literacy. I think that the CEO themselves has not been like just historically involved enough. I think they usually outsource it to the CTO or the CIO, and then you kind of get these funky cost-cutting, use cases. When in reality, integrating it into your business is going to be the revenue generator in the long run. So those are some of the biggest change management blocks I see. When you get to the actual implementation level, I think that it goes back to these, like, how are we investing problems? I think if you can get a board or a committee of people together, superstars in the company, it's a great visibility opportunity for them. People that can bring together a bunch of ideas, a portfolio of ideas, right? Through a few sessions of meeting, and then commit to like 10. Okay, so high ROI, low investment ideas. Commit to 10. What's going to happen inevitably is 4 of those are going to fail. Okay, but 6 of them are going to work. And if you're getting 1 more over a coin flip, that's business success. Okay, that's success. And by the way, nobody's one name is attached to the losers. Okay, it's the whole committee's name is attached to the winners and the losers, so they look great. And then that helps you figure out how to. This is for the slower investing organizations, but those are going to help. And I think a lot of organizations right now don't even have those available to go and identify those use cases. Let me pause there.
Okay, that sounds great, and it's very similar to a situation we had with a large organization in the last few years. Initiative started off in the technology area, then they realized they needed to bring marketing in, then they needed to bring in strategy, and eventually it was across the whole C-suite across every function. And it was that sort of like, we need to be able to think about digital and AI and all of these new technologies through a different lens. You know, we're a 100-plus-year-old company. We need to think differently. We need to understand technology, but we also need to understand, how do we make this happen? Like, where do we place our bets? How do we implement the experiments to learn fast and then put in place? So we're in sync there, Joe. Another question: how should an organization proceed with AI implementation when the baseline data is poor or absent? And the question Ken poses is specific to a sales organization, but I think that probably is beyond, moves beyond just sales. It's a
So I see this a lot where a company has a problem they want to solve or automate, or they want to use artificial intelligence. Actually, I was thinking about this morning. Like, there's this funny methodology that's become ascendant the last few years. It's called jobs to be done. I maybe we've all heard about it now. And it's like, the original intent of jobs to be done was not like, what are the functions you want to automate? Like, the original intent was, how do you talk to your ultimate customers to understand what the psychological impediments are to them being able to do what they need to do, or the physical impediments to them being able to, so that you can ultimately achieve the objective that you want. So what I'm seeing these days is like, the job to be done is close sales. And it's like, no, like, closing sales is your objective. Like, that's going to help your business. The job to be done is like, once you figure out, oh, well, they're not closing sales because internally, we're not bonusing people enough. The job to be done is, we got to bonus them enough. So how do we free up the capital to do that, right? Or our customers, why aren't they closing? Well, it's because they're not seeing enough value. How do we, produce that value with this XYZ part of our process? Or, so I think that, like, jobs to be done right now is conflicting, or actually even ironically, going back to this original problem where people go, oh, can I just throw the chatbot at that and it'll close sales? Because the job to be done is close sales. We're going to use AI to close sales. Okay, so when people go and do that, they misidentify the real job to be done. It creates a problem where you then don't know what data sources you need to go and solve the problem. And so you end up using just the data sources that are available. Oftentimes, the data sources that are available might be somewhat related to the thing that you're trying to actually achieve, but are not going to be actionable. There might be zero action you can take. They're not going to necessarily provide you with what's called a causally valid inference. So a good example there is, sure, ice cream sales and crime go hand in hand. And if you throw those two data series from, like, the Atlanta metropolitan area into an AI model, for forecasting, the model's going to be like, oh yeah, well, if you want to decrease crime, you got to decrease people eating ice cream because, they're correlated. But the truth is, it's just like, those things spike in the summer because kids are out of school and ice cream tastes good when it's hot outside. And so, like, algorithms are not smart about determining what's actually a causal relationship versus a confounded or a correlational relationship. And just throwing things into data that exist are not going to get you that far. And so I think what people need to do is, number one, what is the thing I think that I should do? What's my hypothesis? Okay, like, I think that to close our sales, we need to go out and we need to improve the value that's given to customers. Why would that help? Because I know that, let's just say that you're in, like, the sales business for, like, a lawn care, right? I know that when we make a sale and it's a lawn care problem, if we're producing, if we include a fertilizer product or something that's going to make the grass seem greener, the owners are going to be happier. So that's my hypothesis. We're going to include an incentive, that basically helps us close the sale, keeps your grass greener. Then you have to determine how you would know if you succeeded with that hypothesis. And that is what I call, the theory. How would we know if we'd be getting higher sales closing rates? But if we go and ask people, like, what is the reason that you closed? You would be having, oh, it's because it's greener. It's because because I know that I can get a greener grass lawn, and you're including photos of the green grass, something like that. And ultimately, this is the piece that people miss is, and now what is the action you would take if you actually had the right information to support this hypothesis. And, if you can't actually roll that out as part of a larger sales process, then that was like a fun experiment, but it's never going to do anything for your business. And so all those components there, right? Decomposing it, what am I going to do? Why am I going to do it? And what, or what am I trying to test? And then what would I actually ultimately test it? It requires the right data points. And I think too many times people just try to stuff the data they have into that framework.
Right. Yeah. That sounds very much like you took our executive decision-making course, Joe. Maybe you could teach in it. So hopefully, Ken, that helped answer your question. Shiva asks, what are your thoughts on the ethical considerations? I know when you talked a little bit before about the landscape, I wrote down a bias question mark. How does bias come into this? Bias obviously comes into this. So what are the ethical considerations? And then also if you can talk a little bit about, how does bias come in, and how do we help remove, to the extent we can, remove bias from the answers or the actions that we take through AI?
Okay, so it's a good question. It's a question that's on everybody's mind. First point, in business, you don't want ethical AI, you want responsible AI. Okay, so the first point I make is we think, as a society, we care about ethical practices. That's an important question. But if you're in business, you're profit-oriented. And profit-oriented businesses are not always compatible with doing like the best thing for society, right? It would be great if we went and sold our healthcare at a cost of $0 because it would make everybody healthier. But we have to maintain, in this case, it's not about profit necessarily. It's just like, how do we keep the entire thing like working, right? How do we meet the cost with the revenue?
Sustainability of the service.
And if we didn't have a sustainable healthcare enterprise, then we wouldn't have healthcare for anyone, right? And so we have to be careful distinguishing what's responsible from what's ethical, because they are technically different concepts. Now, if we think about responsible artificial intelligence within the context of business, there's lots of problems right now that I'm seeing that open up businesses to, for example, catastrophic risk. So one of them is not paying attention to the third-party agreements that you've made with data providers. Like a lot of people now will have Slack. Everybody uses Slack. They'll have a data provider that automatically generates, customer profile enrichment data that goes into Slack, because if there's an integration that, when you're on the phone with a customer and you're trying to close them, just to use this earlier example, they need the data, it's in Slack, and then you can just access it all automatically based on sort of the single interface. But then what happens is that Slack data, and this happened at Salesforce, for example, was automatically being piped. All the text was being piped into the training of a new large language model for the company that then would be used for other applications. But the third-party data agreement said you cannot use our data for anything other than just this sales process. You can't go and basically steal the data, embed it into a model that you're now then going to go use that would technically replace the value of the agreement that we made. And so I think a lot of people are ignoring these, I call it the Russian nesting doll problem, like all these relationships, right, that go between all the data sources and the training of the models. Because once you train a model, it technically includes that information. And so just to be responsible with how you implement AI, you have to inventory all those and make sure that you're not crossing your wires. There's another big problem, which is, I highly value and I strongly believe in the right to be forgotten. I think that privacy is like a really, really important, sort of enshrined privilege that we have been given. And the reason that privacy is so important, I think a lot of people miss this too. Privacy is important, not because like you need to be able to do nefarious things without somebody seeing you. Right? That's not why everybody's like, well, why don't you just give us full access to your life? Like if you're not doing anything wrong, shouldn't be a problem, right? The right to privacy makes it so that you can truly and freely express your creative intention and self in ways that we previously wouldn't have known. Privacy enforced essentially makes it so that the thought processes that you will go through in everyday life only conform to the pre-approved thought processes that everyone thinks about. And the beauty of creativity and ultimately, I think a free society is that your creative intent and your creative ability creates new ideas and innovations that people never would have thought of before. That's how we got the computer. That's how we got, I mean, like all these great technologies. And the more that we are able to protect our privacy, the more creativity and innovation we'll get. The problem comes when you're being surveilled, because and there's a great thought experiment. It's a Michel Foucault idea. Some people have their hackles up when you think of Michel Foucault. He was a controversial figure in philosophy. But in this idea, there's a prison, and all these prisoners are all in their cells. It's in a circle, and in the middle there's one guard who's looking at everybody. So you can see when the guard's looking in your direction. So instead of like reading that book that you smuggled into the cell, you put it on the shelf, and you just pretend like you're asleep. Right. So you change your behavior to what is the societally approved behavior when somebody's observing you. Then, he looks away, or she looks away, whoever's in the tower, and then you go back to reading the book. Right. The problem is if you put, an opaque glass over that tower, and you don't know if the guard is looking at you or not, you are going to now start what's called, you're going to self-censor yourself. You're going to censor yourself. And you're going to start producing behaviors that you think are in line with the dominant behavior, right? And that's going to make it so that even if there's no one in that tower, because you don't know, right? You are never going to actually freely express your creativity again. So, and that hurts innovation. So responsible, ethical, et cetera. I think we've blended a few of the lines, but I think that societally, we have to grapple with that issue. I think it's important for business because a lot of business models these days make money off of surveillance, and it's starting to change how Gen Z looks at behaviors. And more specifically for businesses, I gave you one example, but I can give you more.
Yeah.
Is I think you have to be responsible for how you're looking at AI.
We're working on a series of program offerings focused on customer data platforms. So, and we had a series, I think, sort of working on what it is, and then personalization and some other things. Privacy was the last one. When we shared that with the advisory board, they said, no. Privacy has got to be the first course that you run, because it is so important. You've got to get that mindset right. We've got to have people understand that before we can go into the details. So
and just to interrupt, I mean, privacy is important for business from a responsible AI perspective, because if you violate trust with your customers, your business is gone.
Right.
And that's the important piece. Society, yes, great, right? And we can think about those problems, but your business will be gone if you violate your customers.
So I'm just cautious about our time, Joe. So I'm looking through the questions. Here's one. As a mid-career public policy advisor, already ahead of my peers in AI adoption, how do I enhance my current value and knowledge work and future-proof my career in this area? So if I'm already feel like I'm ahead of the curve in terms of what I'm doing with AI, how do I keep ahead of that curve?
Well, I get this question actually usually from believe it or not, I get it from a lot of mothers with their kids. I actually had this last summer, and I just saw that Joe Domaleski's in the chat. So good to see you, Joe. He showed up to one of our town halls that we did around the state, all about AI. And at one of them, you ever take your kid? I don't know, for the people who have kids on the call, you ever take your kid to an event and you're like, this is for your education. You're gonna learn something out of it. I think that she took her kid to this seminar because she was like, you're gonna get an education. And afterwards, people come and they queue up, they want to ask me questions. And so she kind of is shoving her son up to the front of the line. And then she's like, ask him the question. And he's like, hey, Dr. Sutherland, is it true that, there's going to be AI careers? How do I get an AI career in the future? And, my response to him was, you don't get an AI career. You don't actually get a career in AI. What you do is you get a career in whatever you were normally going to do, right? And you have a facility at using artificial intelligence technologies to do better at that career. You're still going to get doctors who go and be doctors, but are now going to be a little bit better because they have the additional information that could come from artificial intelligence. You're still going to get people in business who are experts in oil and gas and energy, right? Or people who understand how the manufacturing, the manufacturing business, 10% of Georgia's economy, I'm sorry, 10% of Georgia's workforce, and has all the, there's little parts that they manufacture that that's one little domain expertise of, making screws and nuts and bolts, right? Versus like manufacturing rubber mats, right? That there's all these gray areas where you can become a domain expert, meet the networks of people, create these very profitable businesses, and still be in manufacturing. So I think the important thing is select the domain that you truly believe intersects at what you're good at, right? What you're really passionate about and what's going to pay you money. And then start thinking about how to use artificial intelligence technologies as something that supports your ability to do that better. Now, for you, you say, okay, I'm already good at it. Well, I think that there's a role for people like you to go and become the evangelists or the literacy providers within the organization. Like a lot of times when you get that promotion to vice president or to senior director or, kind of wherever you're at in your career, you said mid-career, that comes because you showed a vested interest in helping improve outcomes, not just for the business, but for all the people, because it shows leadership, right? So I think that the opportunity there is start a literacy working group that helps mentor people in how to use these technologies, right? And that ends up raising your profile and getting you those promotions, because ultimately you're going to do great in the business, right? You're going to do great. But I think that being promoted usually at that level requires a leadership component too.
That's great. I just noticed a quick follow-up to the use case you talked about with the microphones in patient examination rooms. How is that patient's personal information being protected?
Well, we have HIPAA compliant privacy practices, right? So there's lots of different ways we do it. Number one is any model that we use, and this just isn't just Emory Healthcare, I'm just going to talk universally at this point. Any large language model we use is what's called an air-gapped model. So it's not connected to the internet in a way that would go and leak the data out to model providers. So they can't phone home. It's a separate model artifact that's been trained on global data, but deployed in one direction so that it's not communicating information that's being used in that process back to the outside world. So, just simple, basic firewalling and cybersecurity practices are all in place. So no leakage is going to happen. Number two, we do what's called PII scrubbing just to even ensure additional protections. So if there's individually identifying information like your name or your certain types of features of your disease, et cetera, those will basically be blanked out through a scrubbing engine before it gets used to summarize, into a note. And if anything is persisted, there has to be a reason why it's persisted, and there has to be protections on who can access it, et cetera. And we wouldn't manage it any different than an EMR or, an electronic medical record system. So I think a lot of people got worried in the past that the information is leaking out into ChatGPT stealing your information. But these days, that doesn't really, that's not as much of a problem if you know what you're doing. And I believe that we do.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question, and I'm pulling several together. So what should organizations do to prepare their workforces for this new era?
I think that there's a few pieces. We talked about alignment with strategy. That starts first, because if nobody feels like they have the sandbox, then they're never going to go and, play in it, right? If nobody's playing in it, then you're not going to get any innovation that helps advance the business. Number two is providing literacy services that focus the use cases that people develop on the strategic objectives that are set. Too many times organizations are going to go and I've seen this a lot. It's we're going to make ChatGPT available to everybody. And everybody starts playing with it. And it's like, oh, look what I did. I made this fun little use case that like takes my files, from yesterday and then makes a fun slideshow that I can watch today. And it's like in a cartoon and it's entertaining. And I'm like, that's wonderful. What did that do to achieve, business objective one, which was like, close more sales, right? and and so there's I think this, I call it the death by a thousand cuts problem, where too many people, if there's not alignment of the literacy resources to the strategic objectives, are just going to go and use it, and it's like you're not going to see any ROI because it's going in too many different directions.
Right.
Third is I think making available within the organization methodologies and thought processes that can be implemented where employees can apply literacy, but in a structured format to then go achieve measurable results. And that goes back to some of these frameworks. Actually, I talk about one of these frameworks in my book, if you're interested. It's called Analytics the Right Way. And you can go and you can take that book, you can apply that methodology to go and achieve like literally measurable business results over time. And I think that if people have that, then they have the alignment, they've got the resources, and then they've got the methodology they need to go and actually produce the outputs. And if you can do those three things, I think that you'll be a lot more successful.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe. Over to you, Tammy. And Tammy, you're on mute. That's what we need AI to do, right?
I know, to tell me to come off of mute when I'm talking to everyone. So again, thank you, Nicola. But a great round of applause for Joe. Thank you, Joe, for sharing all of your knowledge and your insights with us today on all things AI. A lot of really great information and so many great questions that we couldn't even get to all of them. But really appreciate you. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us this morning. Again, for all of your questions and comments, we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on Business Over Breakfast. So we want to share a couple of things with you before we wrap up. Our next Business Over Breakfast is on April the 17th, more on AI. So we're going to be joined by Rajiv Garg as he talks to us about AI agents in business, hype, reality, and the road ahead. And so we would also like to share with you some of our featured short courses. Again, we are really looking at how we can build up leaders. And a lot of that is, how can we use data? How can we use AI? We have a new suite of asynchronous online courses that you can take with us, featuring data analytics, technology and strategy, and applications of AI in business. We also have an in-person Leveraging AI for Business course that's going to be taking place on April the 30th and May the 1st. And then please take a look at our Disrupting Your Business strategy on May 13th and 14th. And again, we really appreciate you for taking time out of your busy schedule with us today. We look forward to seeing you on future Business Over Breakfast. Take care and have a great rest of your day, everyone.